You know, just about a year ago, I was caught in a loop of scrolling on Instagram for hours every single day. My screen time was something like 7 hours every day. Not because I was working, but because I was genuinely just wasting time scrolling through reels on Instagram. And it was an awful period in my life because the reason I was there in the first place, the reason I went on Instagram was simply because I was trying to build a business. I grew a following on there and I learned basically, I cracked the code on how to gain views. I started building an Instagram following. I started posting reels and some of them gained millions of views. And so it felt good in the beginning because I was doing exactly what I went on there for. But the problem was that I was going on there to get an idea of what I could eventually post as a reel. And so in order to do that, I had to think about what's trending right now, the music, the captions, everything like that. And to do that, I was scrolling through my reels feed. A lot of the feed was just nonsense, things that I didn't genuinely care about at all. It was not related to anything that I was posting about. And it honestly made me feel awful because I didn't want to do it. I was just trying to get the end result, which was to create my own reel. Oftentimes I would scroll for hours and I still hadn't come up with an idea that I could post. Because when you're in that state, you're not really like thinking creatively. All you're doing is consuming content. And so by the end, I was not better off than I was in the beginning. I didn't have any ideas. Still, I was stuck. But it's not just about that, because for some people, they're not going on the platform to post. They have no intention on posting anything. And so for me to break out of this, I think was a little bit harder than it may be for other people, which is good news for you if you're caught in this cycle. For me, it was so difficult because I was trying to build this business. I kind of had to go on the platform for that reason. But there were many days that I wasn't even going on for that reason anymore. I was just caught in a loop of wanting to go back and scrolling. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was stuck because my dopamine levels in my brain were messed up. Dopamine is a chemical in your brain. And basically the way it works is it drives your motivation and your energy. And when it's depleted, you don't have any drive or motivation to do anything other than the things that you've trained it to seek out. So for me, that was social media. I would go to Instagram and scroll. Because the way it works is basically you have these levels in your mind. I want you to think of it like a wave pool. The way the dopamine system works is like a wave pool. And when your waves are moving up and down normally, that's how it's supposed to be. You normally get motivation and dopamine from regular things. So you go out and you buy a sandwich or something, right? You get a spike in dopamine, and that's good. And then it goes back down, and then it's supposed to come back up. The problem is with things like Instagram, it's overstimulating. So you get reel after reel, spiking your dopamine to high levels, and by the end, it crashes. Now, like I said about that wave pool, think about these waves as they are splashing up and down, right? In a wave pool, that's normal. It's supposed to happen. But in your dopamine system, when you do it too much, think of it like the water spills out of the pool. What that means is the overall level of dopamine in your brain now decreases. This is known as your baseline level of dopamine. When that level goes down, what ends up happening is you feel depleted of motivation and energy. And that's exactly how I was feeling. I went on there for the intention that I was going to work. I wanted to come up with an idea for a reel so I could post. But all that ended up happening was I got caught in the loop. Day after day of doing this, month after month, I realized that I was not in control of this anymore. It was in control of me. I was not going on for the purpose of work anymore. I was going on because I simply wanted that next spike in dopamine. Even though I knew afterwards it would leave me feeling depleted. If you're in a similar boat, if you've had a similar experience, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because after you have that kind of, after you go in for so long doing that, what ends up happening is you just feel so awful inside. You feel tired. You don't want to do anything else. But what's crazy is you go right back to it within even a few hours from that point. Because You have this need for dopamine. It's not something you want. You absolutely need it. In fact, dopamine is so critical within your brain that if you were to shut it off in someone's brain, their body would literally go numb. Because dopamine also controls your motor skills. Dopamine is a huge system within your brain's circuitry. It's the reward system in your brain, but it also controls your energy and motivation. And so because of that, you cannot just override it with logic. You can't, because what ends up happening is in that moment, that part of your brain basically like shuts off and you just go straight back to it, whatever you've trained yourself to go back to. So when I started going back to Instagram, it wouldn't be till hours later where I'd finally be able to stop and I'd say, what did I just do for 3 hours? Why did I waste my time like that? It was awful. So what do you practically do to fix this? You need to be willing, first of all, to cut it out. You need to recognize that it is a problem. If you're not at that point yet, you can't change. But I'm not going to get into that here. I'm assuming that you already realize this is a problem and that you do want to change. So if that's the case, then you need to take practical steps towards doing it. What does that look like? That means cutting out everything completely, going cold turkey. A lot of people won't agree with this. They think you need to wean yourself off of it, but I disagree because I have done that in the past and it has never worked. Because you know what happens when you just give yourself a little bit of leeway saying, okay, I will do it just for a little bit and I'll slowly reduce the time. You don't end up following through. What ends up happening is you end up going on longer, regardless of whether it's social media like we're talking about here or anything else that spikes your dopamine, anything like video games or junk food or anything else. Anything that is spiking your dopamine has control over you right now, and you need to be willing to cut it out completely. So number one, you already know that you want to quit this. So number two, you need to be willing to put in place barriers that will make it hard for you to access that in the first place. So think about Instagram or TikTok, whatever it is that you feel has a hold on you. What can you practically do right now to stop it? Now you might think, okay, I'll put on some time restrictions, but ask yourself, haven't you done that in the past before? And it didn't stop you. You went right back to it. Why? Because it's so easy in the moment to just say cancel, right? You just turn off that timer and then you go right back to it and you're back to scrolling. Now the next thing you might think about is deleting the app. And honestly, you're on the right track here, but that's probably still not enough because I bet you've probably done that in the past as well. I know that I have, and yet the app was still on my phone. One, because for me, I needed to do it so I could post on Instagram. But let's say you don't actually need it for any business, you're just on there for scrolling and you know you need to cut this out. Recognize that and say, what do? I can't just delete the app because I'll just download it again. It takes no time at all. 10 seconds, it's back on your phone, right? So what do you do first? Well, I'll tell you what I did. I put blockers on it. I put blockers on it first. So that way, after I deleted the app, even if I were to reinstall it, I couldn't open the app. Now you might think that's extreme, but that's honestly the point. You need to be willing to take extreme measures in order to cut out these things. Again, if you're already at the point that you realize this is a problem and that you need to remove it, then there should be no resistance to doing this because it's the next logical step. But if you're not at the point that you must change yet, that's why you feel resistance. But you should be willing to do it. No matter how hard it feels in the moment, you know when you do it, you're gonna feel better. Because guess what? Ever since that I put that restriction on and deleted the app, it doesn't cross my mind. I no longer crave it. Now, of course, from time to time, it could still come up, of course, right? But the odds of that happening, the odds of you thinking about it, and the odds of you going back are basically 99% eliminated. You no longer will do it, right? So why not give yourself that? That's like a gift to your future self, so you don't have to use willpower. You see? I really hope you take this seriously, because if you realize it is a problem for you, just as it was for me, then you need to be willing to put in this effort. Put in the hard work right now, and your future self will thank you for it. You won't have the cravings the way that you do right now. You'll be able to reset your dopamine levels back to baseline, because that's what happens. When you finally stop engaging in instant gratification behaviors, you finally are able to reset your dopamine levels because now they're no longer spiking up and down. Instead, there's just calm waves, and your baseline will go back up. And when that happens, you'll truly feel fulfilled. You'll find fulfillment in regular things, just like I do right now. That's why I come out here, record these videos. I come out on a walk every day. Even though my hands are freezing right now holding up this phone, I still feel genuinely happy inside because I don't need those things anymore. I never did. They were just stimulation. When you can cut those things out, you genuinely will find true happiness and fulfillment. And I really hope you take this seriously.